Hi. Oh, that's better. My name's Ben-Ari. I'm a founder and CEO of a company called Applied Blockchain. Applied Blockchain develops blockchain solutions, and we've been doing this since 2015. And most recently, we've been developing NFT marketplaces, DeFi protocols, almost any application you can imagine on the blockchain. Our team is involved in it in some way. We've developed and deployed over 100 different solutions over time. We've got a team of 70 engineers. Some of the work we've been doing is in the DeFi space, and we work in particular on the Ethereum blockchain, and most recently, a lot of our work is on Algorand, on the Algorand blockchain, if you've heard of that one. I'm going to talk to you today about DeFi, and in particular about a product that we're working on and a problem that we're looking to solve, which is connecting real-world assets to DeFi liquidity pools, and doing it in a way that doesn't reveal or compromise the data behind these assets. Okay, so I'm going to divide DeFi into two types, right? We have fully collateralized DeFi or over-collateralized DeFi, where the assets that are being funded are born and exist on-chain, and they're native to the blockchain. This is how most of DeFi works today. So you have digital assets, you have protocols which know how to lend to those assets because they see the asset, its origins, and its history on-chain. So something that's completely native, a token that's created on-chain, whose value and whose price and whose trading and historical activity lives on-chain, is something that's easy for the DeFi protocols to connect to and to provide and to lend on the basis of. Right? And most of the DeFi that we've had, most of the activity that we've had in the last 12, 18 months or so, is all based on fully and over-collateralized lending using these native digital assets as collateral. An area that's being explored and being extended, and it was talked about earlier in this conference, is using DeFi liquidity pools to lend to assets and to entities where their histories and their activities are off-chain. Right? So we're talking about lending on the basis of invoices, or lending on the basis of lending to companies and to businesses based on business and trade documents, and to funds whose activity and whose management is outside of the blockchain. Now, the problem with doing that type of lending is that the smart contracts, the liquidity pools on the blockchain, cannot assess the viability and the risk of those off-chain assets, because all of the data and the history and really everything that needs to be assessed in order to assess the risk and to price the lending exists off-chain. Now, there's a bunch of companies, and I think some of them spoke here earlier today, which are looking to solve that. And what they do is they source assets that exist off-chain, and companies and funds and so on that exist off-chain. They assess them, and they have an independent group of assessors who will look to assess the risk and price them. And this is done manually. And then they present them to on-chain liquidity pools. And those on-chain liquidity pools, those are smart contracts that receive the input of those independent verifiers and then release the funds from the contracts on that basis. Now, the problem with that approach, as I'm showing on here, is that it's manual and it reveals the data about the assets and the businesses to a dispersed group. Right? So in order to make it secure and trusted, you have to have more than one party that's doing the validation and the pricing and the assessment of the risk. And the more people and parties you have doing that, the more people and parties are privy to the data behind the asset. So for example, if it's invoice financing, then the details of that business and the details of the invoice and all of the historical transactions and creditworthiness and so on all have to be distributed to a broad group of assessors, and they'll have to provide their input, and that has to go to the blockchain. So the first problem there is data privacy, because that data is revealed and spread. And the more you reveal and spread data, the more it's at risk of being compromised. Right? So we don't really like that solution. The second problem with trying to bring those off-chain assets into a DeFi liquidity pool is just the potential of gaming and fraud with those assessments. Because those assessments are being made by independent validators, and they're manual. Right? So it's somebody looking at the history and pricing and assessing risk, and then just entering that information into a blockchain. And they could be, they could be trying to manipulate the result or the output, because they might be incentivized in different ways and so on. And the way the on-chain the sort of fully collateralized DeFi that I described earlier works is it doesn't have to trust anyone because the history of the digital assets and their pricing and their activity and so on is on chain. Here you have to trust these independent assessors. And we see that as a second problem. So not only are they being given all the data, but actually they've got to be trusted with their assessment, not to try and manipulate the situation. So the solution we've come up with is really taking the trust that exists in a blockchain and extending that out towards the data sources that are behind the assets that we're looking to finance. Okay? And those data sources, we've listed some on the right here. They include data that comes from, that's held in bank accounts by banks. They can include credit assessments made by companies like Experian. They can include accounting information that sits in an SAP, an ERP system, or an accounting software like Xero. And also, of course, registries like Companies House and so on. But some of this data can be really sensitive. It can be commercially sensitive. And it's not the kind of thing that you really want to put on a blockchain. So what we do in a solution like Silent Data is we connect directly to those data sources, and we make an assessment in an environment that's called a secure enclave, a hardware secure enclave. That means that the data goes straight from the bank or straight from the credit agency into the secure environment, which we cannot access. The platform hosts cannot access. And the assessment that's made is fully automated, and it's predictable. So it's code, a bit like a smart contract. It's code that can be trusted because it cannot change. And so the blockchain then receives the output of this process. The DeFi liquidity pool on the blockchain receives the output and can trust that the assessment's been made and that it's made on data that's come from the sources that are stated. So for example, it's based on real bank account data. And all of this is done without revealing any of that data to the platform, to us, to assess, to anybody that's involved in the process, or to the blockchain. So the data, it's as if it never left the original source. Okay? And it can be fully trusted by the blockchain, so the assessment, so the algorithm that goes with the assessment and the allocation of funds in the DeFi contract are completely trustless, as if we were lending to assets that are native on chain. Okay? So we believe we've solved two major problems here, with the data privacy and with the ability to trust off-chain data sources. The solution itself, we presented it, we ran it through the FCA sandbox, and we also won a number of industry awards for it, because I believe it's the first solution of its kind. And so the FCA has seen it and reviewed it. We won FinTech awards and also the Open Banking Expo award, because we connect to open banking in a way that the data is never revealed to anyone and can be assessed on chain. The business model, it's a little bit complex here, but we have a liquidity pool on chain, and the data is connected to off-chain data sources and is processed privately in the Silent Data platform. So that's Silent Data, and that's a solution that we're testing initially on the Algorand blockchain, and initially with invoices and invoice financing. Another platform that we're working on also with Algorand is what we call a trustless token bridge. And this is a separate solution. This is for integrating or for taking tokens between blockchains, and in particular between other blockchains and Algorand itself. And for this, we're again using similar technology to the one we used in Silent Data. A little bit about the company before I go. So these are some of the partners and companies that we've been working for over the years. So a broad range of enterprises, banks, energy companies, and also a whole range of startups, from NFT marketplaces, DeFi, and so on. And that was it. Thank you very much.